41 years old. No primary weapon downfield. Just Tom Brady commanding an undermanned unit. They bled out victories, relying on aging defense running purely on fumes. Meanwhile, a 23-year-old phenom tossed 50 touchdowns, making elite defenses look completely frozen. The succession rumors ignited instantly. Then came a February night in Tampa, 2021. Case closed. Patrick Mahomes has been hunting that ultimate crown ever since. Everyone overlooks New England's 2018 campaign amidst the Mahomes hype, but they still secured 11 victories against 5 losses. 4,355 yards, 29 scores at 41. Those are staggering metrics for any mortal quarterback. Yet 2018 felt off. For the first time in a generation, the dynasty seemed totally maxed out, struggling just to survive. Brady's supporting cast was critically flawed. Gronk's body was betraying him. He pushed through 16 matchups, but the legendary monster from past seasons was visibly fading. Cleveland shipped over Josh Gordon midway through. An absolute physical freak, but incredibly erratic, New England desperately rotated wideouts, praying for anyone who could actually shake a defensive back. Julian Edelman battled back from a blown knee and a ban, immediately returning as the ultimate safety valve. Still, a prime Edelman lives in the slot. He was never going to threaten a defense deep. Ugly trench warfare victories. 17-13 finishes, anchored entirely by Sony Michel pounding the rock. Brady masterminded a flawless underneath attack, squeezing out production that superior rosters couldn't replicate. Belichick's defensive unit mirrored that exact struggle. The brilliant schemes still twisted quarterbacks in knots, but all the legs meant explosive opponents were hanging massive points on them. One brutal question haunted the franchise all year. When does the clock finally strike midnight? The oldest gunslinger under center, 18 years of absolute dominance, finally being suffocated by the salary cap reality. They owned the conference for 20 years. Now, a 23-year-old Kansas City weapon seemed engineered specifically to steal their throne. The veteran sensed the shift. His pocket presence tightened, getting the ball out faster than his prime years demanded. 11 wins, 5 losses, another division crown. Come January, they were still breathing when the stakes peaked. Business as usual for the juggernaut, except during Week 6, the young superstar marched into Foxborough and almost buried them before Halloween, while the legend fought tooth and nail alongside a deteriorating squad. Patrick Mahomes was rewriting the sport's physics. His effortless brilliance demanded your attention. You couldn't look away from the broadcast. The metrics signal a complete hijacking of the record books. He logged 5,097 yards and 50 touchdowns in 2018, becoming merely the second passer ever to shatter both barriers simultaneously. Only Peyton Manning achieved that in 2013. Proving this kid was in God-tier territory, he connected on angles that defied football logic, printing sidearm rockets, cross-body moonshots unleashed with defenders actively destroying him. His supernatural arm strength fired lasers across the entire field, arriving before safeties could even plant their cleats. Andy Reid scrapped conventional play calling, unleashing an attack completely fueled by sheer improvisation. The playbook became a mere starting point. The real devastation occurred when the pocket broke down and instincts took over. His supporting arsenal induced cold sweats for opposing defensive coordinators everywhere. Tyreek Hill was untouchable, and his quarterback could effortlessly drop 50-yard bombs perfectly into his hands without him losing a step. Travis Kelce absolutely bullied any defender matched against him, while Kareem Hunt stalked the backfield as a lethal dual threat. Shutting down everyone was impossible. If a secondary doubled the primary targets, the young gunslinger just scrambled for back-breaking yardage. Drew Brees and Russell Wilson played phenomenal football, yet neither of them made the rest of the league look completely obsolete. The greatest of all-time chatter erupted instantly. By late November, it wasn't just internet noise. Veterans and broadcasters were fully buying the hype. The storyline crystallized. This wasn't just a rising star. This was the ultimate Grim Reaper coming for Brady's crown. That exact tension turned their Week 6 clash into blockbuster theater. Kansas City rolled into Foxborough an undefeated 5-0, having absolutely slaughtered their early competition. What erupted on October 14, 2018, became the undisputed crown jewel of the regular season. The ultimate proving ground. Was this kid a legitimate messiah, or merely a stat pad of feasting on weak defenses? The reigning champions delivered an immediate reality check, utterly dominating the opening 30 minutes. Operating with surgical precision, the veteran carved up Kansas City using Belichick's signature quick strike tempo. Sony Michel battered the defensive front. The challengers stalled out, kicking field goals, while their rookie sensation finally looked mortal. He tossed a pair of picks, walking right into the same defensive buzzsaw that had been eating young signal callers alive for 20 years. Going into the half, New England dominated the scoreboard, sitting on a massive 24-9 cushion, but the third quarter flipped the script entirely. The kid stepped back onto the turf, fully weaponized, completely shrugging off his earlier blunders and that daunting 15-point hole. He sparked the rally by hitting Kareem Hunt for a blazing 67-yard gain, immediately following up with a 14-yard scoring bullet to Tyreek Hill. Following another quick end zone toss to Hill, Kansas City somehow snatched a 33-30 advantage late in the game. Gillette Stadium went dead silent. That deafening roar vanished, leaving the hometown faithful in a state of sheer shock they almost never felt in Foxborough. Yet the veteran just laughed it off and retaliated. He engineered a 4-yard rushing score, set up Stephen Gronkowski for a 50-yard bomber, and reclaimed a 40-33 edge with barely 3 minutes remaining. Everyone assumed the fat lady was singing. Instead, the Phenom launched an absolute 75-yard missile to Hill, deadlocking the battle at 40 in the blink of an eye. Down to the wire, the legend took over the huddle and reminded the entire league who still wore the crown. Ice in his veins, he found Rob Gronkowski for a clutch 39-yard chunk, marching straight into kicking distance without breaking a single drop of sweat. Gronkowski trotted out and drilled a 28-yarder right at the buzzer, sealing a thrilling 43-40 triumph for the boys in blue. 9 lead swaps, almost 1,000 combined offensive yards. That sheer firepower turned a standard regular season clash into an absolute blockbuster. It laid the perfect groundwork for an epic sequel 3 months down the road at Arrowhead, where a ticket to the big dance would hang in the balance. Round 1 confirmed the young gunslinger was completely legitimate, but it also proved the old master absolutely refused to hand over the keys to the kingdom anytime soon. The ultimate sequel kicked off exactly 3 months after that Foxborough slugfest, except this time they were going to war on hostile turf. On January 20th, 2019, an unprecedented sea of 77,034 maniacs jammed into Arrowhead, generating the most deafening roar that franchise had ever witnessed. History was being made. The city had never hosted an AFC title clash before that freezing night. Pure electricity buzzed through the streets all week. The squad had steamrolled their schedule, stacking up a vicious 12-4 record. Their superstar quarterback had the MVP hardware in the bag, and they owned the ultimate edge with home turf secured for the entire postseason. Talking heads on television beat the same drum all week. This was the exact moment the crown passed to the new blood, except the defending champs were about to shred that fairy tale into pieces. Taking the opening kickoff, the visitors immediately established absolute dominance, executing the exact same master plan they utilized back in Week 6. They pounded the rock relentlessly, bleeding the clock dry just to keep that lethal young quarterback trapped on the bench as a spectator. Sony Michel capped an agonizing 15-play death march with a 1-yard plunge into the paint, instantly silencing the frantic crowd before they could even clear their throats. When Philip Dorsett holed in a 29-yard strike just before the half, pushing the gap to 14-0, you could hear a pin drop in that stadium. The opposing defensive front invested every second of that first half, dragging the Phenom back down to earth, burying him in the dirt and trapping him in nightmare third and long scenarios. The momentum violently shifted out of the locker room as the sleeping giant of an offense finally snapped awake. A monster 54-yard launch to Sammy Watkins paved the way for a Travis Kelce spike, and the gunslinger kept swinging, connecting with Damian Williams for a pair of fourth-quarter daggers. Clawing all the way out of their grave, the home squad snatched the advantage with barely 2 minutes remaining. And suddenly the concrete pillars of the stadium were literally vibrating, hanging 31 points on the board after the breakthrough relentless drives. The miracle felt entirely secured until the single most controversial snap of the decade went down. The veteran icon dropped into the pocket and threw a catastrophic pick. Lethal mistake that by all rights should have punched the home team's ticket to the Super Bowl. But D. Ford had his hand in the dirt just inches offside. The penalty wiped the turnover out of existence, breathing fresh life into the visitors. Capitalizing on the gift, they punched it into the end zone, only for the kid to orchestrate a jaw-dropping 39-second surgical strike to tee up a Harrison bucket a kick. That boot split the uprights, forcing sudden death. Winning the fateful coin flip, the legendary quarterback marched his platoon straight into hostile territory, completely devoid of panic. Operating like a cold-blooded surgeon, he sliced the secondary to ribbons before Rex Burkhead hammered the final nail into the coffin with a rushing score through the confetti. The victor punched his ticket to title game number 9. He later dismantled Los Angeles 13-3 down in Atlanta 2 weeks later, grinding out a gritty, ruthlessly effective masterclass. He slipped ring number 6 onto his finger, while his young rival was already packing his bags for a long, bitter vacation. The reigning king was simply playing chess on a board the rising star hadn't fully mapped out yet. Veteran savvy is a lethal weapon in pro football, and that evening, it trumped raw, generational talent. Following Super Bowl 53, the entire balance of power in the league fractured. At 41 years of age, he locked down his 6th Lombardi trophy by completely outclassing Sean McVay, the young offensive genius everyone crowned as the future. The whole world assumed that unstoppable empire from the Northeast would literally reign until the end of time. Then, just 14 months later, the absolute impossible became reality. In March 2020, the icon abandoned the only uniform he ever wore, inking a 2-year pact down in Tampa Bay. That bombshell decision severed a 20-year bloodline that forged 6 world titles and built the most terrifyingly dominant alliance sports history had ever seen. Overnight, the gridiron community fractured into 2 warring tribes. Half the fans swore the aging legend was completely cooked, convinced he was nothing but a byproduct of Belichick's brilliant master system all along. Half the league swore he'd completely drown without his old safety net, while the rest bet the house he'd absolutely conquer Tampa. But before his massive free agency move stole headlines, a seismic shift had already rewritten the narrative 30 days prior. Deep into the 4th quarter of Super Bowl 54, San Francisco commanded a 20-10 advantage over Kansas City. Disaster completely loomed for the entire squad once again, until a legendary eruption sparked 21 straight points inside the chaotic final 6 minutes, snatching a 31-20 triumph. A mere 24-year-old kid secured the ultimate crown as Super Bowl MVP. The whispers vanished instantly. This phenom just cemented his lethal clutch gene on the absolute grandest stage in all of sports. Suddenly, the fierce generational war featured undeniable heavy ammunition. Meanwhile, the 43-year-old veteran was completely hitting reset, navigating an unfamiliar city and roster. Though the reigning king sat on a historic $450 million mountain, the crown remained unclaimed, suspended beautifully for anyone bold enough to snatch it. Armed with absolute lethal threats like Heel and Kels, the youngster thrived, while the old goat fought to resurrect a dead Tampa squad starved of postseason action. Entering the 2020 campaign, nobody questioned the young gunslinger as greatness. His supreme dominance was already an undeniable fact. The burning mystery was whether the aging gladiator could still conquer the mountain without the New England machine shielding him. November 29th, 2020, the Titans violently clashed once more as the Red Kingdom invaded enemy territory in Florida. Marching into Raymond James Stadium holding a terrifying 9-1 record, the visitors boasted the most intimidating pedigree in their conference. Struggling at 7-4, the hometown crew was desperately clawing to discover their true identity and salvage the season. Billed as the ultimate litmus test, this showdown would reveal if the veteran belonged among killers, or if the defending champs existed in a completely different stratosphere. A certain speedy receiver ruthlessly silenced those doubts before the crowd could even digest their holiday turkey. Before the opening frame ended, that offensive weapon detonated for 203 yards and 2 scores, igniting the massacre with a massive 75-yard deep strike. The quarterback then unleashed a lethal 44-yard laser, pushing the bloodbath to 17-0. Flawless illustrations of their absolute, terrifying synergy. Celebrating that second kill, the receiver savagely threw up his iconic peace sign right at the opposing bench. Yet despite the early brutal beating, the home squad clawed back, falling short by just 3 points. A distinct momentum shift narrowed the final tally to 27-24. The MVP escaped the afternoon boasting 462 yards and 3 scores, while his prime target secured 13 grabs for an unprecedented 269-yard milestone. The seasoned legend countered with 345 yards and 3 passing strikes, a stat line typically guaranteeing absolute victory. However, a pair of devastating turnovers combined with a secondary totally helpless against that legendary aerial assault ultimately sealed their tragic fate. Post-game chatter totally ignored the final numbers, fixating entirely on the terrifying reality that Kansas City stood as the absolute, unquestioned apex predator of the league. A second collision remained highly uncertain. Though both squads stacked winter victories, the Florida underdogs suddenly caught lightning. Surviving a brutal postseason gauntlet, they absolutely shocked reigning MVP Aaron Rodgers and his Green Bay squad to punch their championship ticket. This guaranteed the legendary gunslinger an unprecedented, historic opportunity. Initial momentum heavily favored the young superstar, executing the kill he set up months prior. Suddenly, a devastating wave of injuries completely obliterated his protective front line. Suddenly, the odds became a total chaotic dead heat. Waiting quietly across the battlefield was a 43-year-old gladiator. Entering his mind-boggling 10th Ultimate Final wearing completely unfamiliar colors. At long last, February 7th, 2021 dawned, as these heavyweights collided once more under the bright championship lights in Florida. The globe was absolutely starving for this bloody reunion since their autumn slugfest. Every spotlight glared down, anticipating the exact moment the fresh venom would rip the throne away. A single brutal quarter of action shattered the narrative. That elusive crown was absolutely staying bolted to the veteran-esque skull. The home squad drew first blood ruthlessly, connecting on a gorgeous 8-yard strike to a familiar giant tight end deep in the paint. Echoing their absolute terrifying dominance from past dynasties, the ageless Mastro spent the whole evening dissecting the defensive schemes long before the ball was even hiked, viciously exploiting weak links and firing strikes flawlessly. Walking away with a 125.8 rating, he logged 201 yards and 3 daggers cleanly, while the old guard executed a masterclass. Total chaos consumed the opposing trenches. The young gun drowned, stumbling to 26 of 49 for 270 yards. Defensive mastermind Talon Bowles orchestrated pure tactical genius, unleashing just 4 hounds while dropping sets into the 7 ghosts in the secondary to completely suffocate every single passing lane. Fleeing for his life 11 separate times, hunting for magic, the desperate quarterback found absolutely zero daylight against that relentless brick wall, ending in a brutal 31-9 bloodbath. The night marked an unprecedented catastrophe. 0 trips to the end zone during the kid's entire legendary run. Defying logic, at 43 years of age, the Eternal King secured his 7th glorious ring during his maiden voyage with a completely different crew. Dominating the very kid anointed to replace him, he violently reminded the globe that the chasm between superstar and immortal god remains impossibly vast. 3 seasons of explosive drama debating the sport as true apex predator culminated in one chilling reality. The old man was far from dead. Despite his jaw-dropping talent, the young phenomenon lacked the final gear of immortality. This ultimate collision did way more than just crown a victor. It permanently altered the definition of gridiron perfection. Hanging up his cleats in February 2023, the legend abandoned a statistical legacy so absurd it felt fabricated. 7 championship jewels, 5 Miffy trophies, and a mind-melting 89,200 yards through the air. Figures defying all mortal logic and comprehension entirely. Even fighting through his swan song at 45 years old, dragging a sinking pirate ship desperately attempting to stay afloat in treacherous waters. He was a relentless machine, shredding defenses for 4,694 yards and 25 touchdowns. An unquenchable competitive fire. He dragged a crumbling supporting cast kicking and screaming. But as the undisputed king penned his final chapter, Kansas City's young gunslinger started forging his own unstoppable legacy. That crushing defeat would have broken a lesser man. Instead of fading, he stayed right in the championship hunt. He hit the grind hard, engineering an absolute juggernaut that leaves every other post-Brady franchise completely eating his dust. Just look at the hardware. Consecutive championship rings in 2022 and 2023, plus another league MP to cement his greatness. They captured back to glory, mirroring New England's dynasty from 20 years prior. In today's grueling salary cap era, that level of ruthless dominance is almost mythical. They nearly captured a historic three-peat during the 2024 campaign, ultimately crashing out against Philadelphia. That 40-22 bloodbath was far more devastating than the box score let on. He is officially on the hunt now. This isn't just a career anymore. It's a relentless sprint to catch a ghost. At barely 30 years old, he already boasts 3 championship rings, 3 finals MVP trophies, and an elusive repeat victory that completely separates him from his peers. Numbers never lie, however, and this summit is terrifyingly high. The Ultimate King walked away with 7 championships, while our challenger is holding steady at 3, meaning he has to capture 4 more just to pull even with a legendary milestone everyone thought was completely impossible to touch. A devastating knee tear in 2025 robbed him of precious time, and the franchise is finally bleeding after 5 grueling years of deep playoff warfare. The foundation is cracking. 2. Shipping Trent McDuffie off to Los Angeles this spring to survive salary cap hell proves the landscape is rapidly shifting. That pivotal championship clash did more than crush the burning debates from 2018 through 2020. It completely defined the brutal stakes for every single kickoff since. The veterans slammed the vault shut on their direct rivalry. The young phenom keeps pounding on the glass, but the agonizing gap to the summit remains absolutely massive. This is the ultimate pursuit, so there it is. The night the greatest ever debate was permanently silenced,